Highlight 44 fallacies. Notes. The 44 fallacies documents may contain bias, prejudice, or professional unintentionally mind. Still, it can help anyone to be aware of their thinking. Remember, the mind is imperfect, limited, impermanent. So the product of the mind is also imperfect. Still, we can learn something from wrong as well as right to avoid the danger of mind-driven. An example of the author: prejudice, mislead, biased. In Post Hoc Fallacies he wrote, "The Republicans pass a new tax reform law that benefits wealthy Americans. In fact, most Democrats are billionaires, millionaires such as CEO of Google, Amazon, FB, Soros, Netflix, bankers, big pharmacy. All of the billionaires donate, support Dems and also promote globalism, communism, socialism that give them the tyrant power to control, suppress, direct, frame the lives of the people without being elected by a real, fair, integrity election. In 2021 they can forcefully vaccinate anybody 2 to 5 times with the same poisonous expired vac. Hasty generalization. Opening parenthesis. Also known as argument from small numbers, statistics of small numbers, insufficient statistics, unrepresentative sample. Form of argument by generalization, faulty generalization, hasty conclusion. Form of inductive generalization, insufficient sample, lonely fact, fallacy, overgenerality, overgeneralization. Description. Drawing a conclusion based on a small sample size, rather than looking at statistics that are much more in line with the typical or average situation. Fallacy. Ad hominem. Ad hominem means against the man, or against the person. Single quote. An ad hominem is a general category of fallacies in which a claim or argument is rejected on the basis of some irrelevant fact about the author of or the person presenting the claim or argument. Typically, this fallacy involves 2 steps. First, an attack against the character of person making the claim, of her circumstances, or her actions is made. Or the character, circumstances, or actions of the person reporting the claim. Second, this attack is taken to be evidence against the claim or argument the person in question is making or presenting. Fallacy. Ad hominem 2 hoc. Also known as U2 fallacy. This fallacy is committed when it is concluded that a person's claim is false because 1. It is inconsistent with something else a person has said, or 2. What a person says is inconsistent with her actions. The fact that a person makes inconsistent claims does not make any particular claim he makes false. Although of any pair of inconsistent claims only one can be true, but both can be false. Also, the fact that a person's claims are not consistent with his actions might indicate that the person is a hypocrite, but this does not prove his claims are false. Fallacy. Appeal to authority. Also known as fallacious appeal to authority, misuse of authority, irrelevant authority, questionable authority, inappropriate authority, ad vericundum. 1. It is flawed because the fact that an unqualified person makes a claim does not provide any justification for the claim. 2. If a person makes a claim about some subject outside of his area of expertise, then the person is not an expert in that context. Hence, the claim in question is not backed by the required degree of expertise and is not reliable. 3. It is important to remember that no person is completely objective. At the very least, a person will be favorable towards her own views. Otherwise she would probably not hold them. 4. The area of expertise is a legitimate area or discipline. Certain areas in which a person may claim expertise may have no legitimacy or validity as areas of knowledge or study. Obviously, claims made in such areas will not be very reliable. Fallacy. Appeal to belief. Appeal to belief is a fallacy that has this general pattern. Most people believe that a claim, X, is true. Therefore X is true. This line of reasoning is fallacious because the fact that many people believe a claim does not, in general, serve as evidence that the claim is true. Description of appeal to common practice. The basic idea behind the fallacy is that the fact that most people do X is used as evidence to support the action or practice. It is a fallacy because the mere fact that most people do something does not make it correct, moral, justified, or reasonable. Description of appeal to consequences of a belief. This line of reasoning is fallacious because the consequences of a belief have no bearing on whether the belief is true or false. The nature of the fallacy is especially clear in the case of wishful thinking. Obviously, merely wishing that something is true does not make it true. Description of appeal to emotion. This fallacy is committed when someone manipulates people's emotions in order to get them to accept a claim as being true. Appeal to popularity. Most people approve of X. So, I should approve of X too. Since I approve of X, X must be true. Fallacy. Appeal to fear. Also known as scare tactics. Appeal to force. Ad baculum. Y is presented. A claim that is intended to produce fear. Therefore claim X is true. A claim that is generally, but need not be, related to Y in some manner. This line of reasoning is fallacious because creating fear in people does not constitute evidence for a claim. Fallacy. Appeal to flattery. Fallacy. Appeal to flattery. Also known as apple polishing. Various colorful expressions. Description of appeal to flattery. Person A is flattered by person B. Person B makes claim X. Therefore X is true. This sort of reasoning is fallacious because flattery is not, in fact, evidence for a claim. Fallacy. Appeal to novelty. Also known as appeal to the new. Newer is better. Novelty. Appeal to novelty is a fallacy that occurs when it is assumed that something is better or correct simply because it is new. Fallacy. Appeal to pity. Also known as ad misericordiam. Description of appeal to pity. An appeal to pity is a fallacy in which a person substitutes a claim intended to create pity for evidence in an argument. This line of reasoning is fallacious because pity does not serve as evidence for a claim. Fallacy. Appeal to popularity. Also known as ad populum. Most people approve of X. Have favorable emotions towards X. Therefore X is true. It is clearly fallacious to accept the approval of the majority as evidence for a claim. Fallacy. Appeal to ridicule. Also known as appeal to mockery, the horse laugh. X, which is some form of ridicule, is presented, typically directed at the claim. Therefore claim C is false. This sort of reasoning is fallacious because mocking a claim does not show that it is false. Fallacy. Appeal to spite. The appeal to spite fallacy is a fallacy in which spite is substituted for evidence when an argument is made against a claim. This sort of reasoning is fallacious because a feeling of spite does not count as evidence for or against a claim. Fallacy. Appeal to tradition. Also known as appeal to the old ways are best. Fallacious. Appeal to the past. Appeal to age. Appeal to tradition is a fallacy that occurs when it is assumed that something is better or correct simply because it is older, traditional, or always has been done. Single quote. Fallacy. Bandwagon. Also known as peer pressure. The bandwagon is a fallacy in which a threat of rejection by one's peers or peer pressure is substituted for evidence in an argument. Single quote. Fallacy. Begging the question. Also known as circular reasoning, reasoning in a circle, petitio principii. Description of begging the question. Begging the question is a fallacy in which the premises include the claim that the conclusion is true or, directly or indirectly, assume that the conclusion is true. Examples of begging the question. Bill. God must exist. Single quote. Jill. How do you know? Single quote. Bill. Because the Bible says so. Single quote. Jill. Why should I believe the Bible? Single quote. Bill. Because the Bible was written by God. Single quote. If such actions were not illegal, then they would not be prohibited by the law. Single quote. The belief in God is universal. After all, everyone believes in God. Single quote. Fallacy. Bias sample. Also known as biased statistics, loaded sample, prejudiced statistics, prejudice sample, loaded statistics, biased induction, biased generalization. Description of biased sample. This fallacy is committed when a person draws a conclusion about a population based on a sample that is biased or prejudiced in some manner. Fallacy. Burden of proof. Includes appeal to ignorance, ad ignorantium, or burden of proof. You cannot prove that God does not exist, so he does. Single quote. Fallacy. Circumstantial ad hominem. A circumstantial ad hominem is a fallacy in which one attempts to attack a claim by asserting that the person making the claim is making it simply out of self-interest. This is because the person has a motivation to make the claim, whether it is true or not. However, the mere fact that the person has a motivation to make the claim does not make it false. Fallacy. Composition. The fallacy of composition is committed when a conclusion is drawn about a whole based on the features of its constituents when, in fact, no justification provided for the inference. This line of reasoning is fallacious because the mere fact that individuals have certain characteristics does not